What's up, everyone? I'm the Vibe Dev, a former machine learning infrastructure engineer at Apple, ex-Google researcher, and currently an AI engineer at one of the largest financial firms in the world. Today, I'm going to break down what Claude Code skills actually are, what they do under the hood, when you should use them, and more importantly, what they are not. There's a lot of confusion and misinformation about Claude skills out there right now, and I want to clear things up for everyone. Okay, so what is a skill actually? If you strip away all of the hype, it's literally just a markdown file, that's it. It's called SKILL.md and it lives inside of a specific folder. Let me show you. You can either put your skill in the Claude/skills directory inside your project, or you can do the same thing in your home directory if you want it to be accessible across all of your Claude instances. Each skill gets its own folder, and inside that folder is the skill.md file. That's really the only file that matters here. Okay, now look at the top of this file. You see the dashes at the top and bottom? This is called YAML font matter, and this is basically where all the configuration lives. This is the stuff that actually makes a skill different from just some random markdown file that you threw together. So this particular skill right here, I built this for my training bot. It's basically a pipeline health checker. So whenever I want to know, like, hey, are my data sources actually publishing on time? Are any of my positions looking weird? Are there any errors showing up in my logs? I literally just type /check pipeline, and then Claude will go and grab all that information for me automatically and tell me exactly what's going on. I don't need this every time I'm working on my project. I only pull it up when something looks off. So that's what makes it a very good skill to have. All right, so let me walk you through the fields. First one is name, pretty self-explanatory. This is what you type after the slash to run it. So this one is check pipeline. I just type in /check pipeline and it fires up. The next one is description. Claude is always reading your skill description in the background. And if you ask Claude something and it thinks one of your skills would help, it'll actually go ahead and run that skill for you automatically. So sometimes you won't even have to run the actual slash command, but you always can if you want to. The cool part of this is that Claude is only reading the short descriptions and it's not actually loading the full skill into your context every single time. It's only going to pull this into context once that skill actually gets triggered. The next field is allowed tools. Normally, Claude would ask you for your permission before it does certain things like running scripts or reading files. This field basically says, hey, while the skill is running, you're allowed to do this and that. The second the skill is done running, those permissions go away. The last thing here is the argument hint. This is just telling you what you could pass to the skill. So for mine, I can use /check pipeline NYC if I want to focus on a specific city. Okay, so below all the font matter, you've just got regular markdown. These are the actual instructions that Claude Code follows when the skill runs. But this is where it actually gets very cool. You see these lines that start with an exclamation point and a backtick? These are called dynamic injections. And what happens is, before Claude even sees any of this, it goes and runs those shell commands first, and then takes the output and injects it right into the context. So by the time Claude actually starts thinking about your request, it already has your latest ingestion timestamps, your model freshness data, all your open positions, your recent error logs. It literally has everything. I'm going to break down these advanced features in way more detail later in the video, but that's essentially what a skill is under the hood. It's a markdown file with some YAML config at the top that only loads into your context when it's actually needed. It's not magic. It's not some plugin system. It's just a structured prompt with extra capabilities baked in. Okay, so now that you know what a skill is, let me show you where it fits in because there's actually 3 different ways you can give Claude knowledge about your project. If you don't understand the difference between them, you're going to start wasting money and getting worse results. Let's start with the first one, which is your CLAUDE.md file. This file sits in the root of your project, and here's the thing you need to understand. Every single time you send Claude a message, this file gets attached along with it. That means it's eating tokens on every single call, and every token costs you extra money, so you want this thing to be as short as you can possibly make it. The official recommendation is to keep it about under 200 lines, but here's the key. Only put things in this file that Claude can't figure out on its own. Claude can already see your code, it could read your package files, it knows what language you're using. You don't need to tell it any of that. What it needs to know is stuff like your build and test commands, key design decisions, and why they were made. So Claude doesn't go around you and try to just change your architecture randomly. The official docs literally say for every single line, ask yourself this: would removing this line cause Claude to make some mistakes? If the answer is no, then cut that out of your CLAUDE.md file right away. Having a bloated CLAUDE.md file will only cause Claude to start ignoring your instructions and perform worse. Okay, so next up we've got rules. These live in Claude/rules directory. And these can either be loaded into every single session, just like CLAUDE.md, or you can scope them to specific files. And that's actually what makes them extremely useful. See this path field at the top? This is telling Claude to only load this rule when it's working on these specific files inside of my weather directory. So all this stuff over here about handling forecast bias correction and probability calculations, Claude will only see this when it's actually touching my forecast code. If I'm working on my dashboard or my API, none of these rules will ever actually load. This way, you're not wasting any tokens or confusing Claude with extra information that it just does not need right now. Okay, so here's the simple way to remember all three. CLAUDE.md loads every single session, keep it short. Rules can load every session or only when you're touching certain files. And skills only show up when you actually need them. 3 different tools for 3 different jobs. Okay, so I want to show you guys something now. This is Anthropic's front-end design skill. This is one that they actually published themselves. And if we look closely, it's literally just design guidelines inside of a markdown file. Use bold typography. Don't default to purple gradients on white. Make things look intentional instead of generic. That's it. There's no scripts running, there's no dynamic injection, no arguments, no subagents, none of the advanced features we just talked about. It's just a prompt telling Claude to make better design choices. And look, that's a totally valid skill. Design knowledge is niche. You don't need this when you're writing backend code or working on your database or API or anything like that, so it makes sense to only load it when you're working on front-end design. That is a perfectly good use case. But on the other hand, you could also just make your own version of this in like 5 minutes with your own fonts and your own color palette, your own design rules for a specific project. And honestly, that's probably going to work better, plus the fact that your website isn't going to look the same exact way everyone else's does. Okay. And now this brings me to something that's actually kind of been bothering me lately. Every single day on TikTok and YouTube, I see people posting stuff like this. Install this skill and become a god, become 10x. Or this skill makes Claude Code a god at front end. And I'm sorry to break the news, but that's not how any of this works. Most of these people are not real engineers who have ever worked in industry. They're just content creators chasing clicks. They see a new feature drop, they slap god mode on one thumbnail, and they post it without actually understanding what's going on whatsoever under the hood. And if you go look at what's actually inside of these so-called god skills, 9 out of 10 times, it's literally just generic coding guidelines. Write clean code, use TypeScript, follow solid principles. So just be aware of what you see out there. And if you ever have any questions, leave a comment or DM me on Twitter and I'll explain anything you need. Okay, so here's what I want you to take away from this. Don't go online and download hundreds of community skills and just dump them into your Claude code. That's not going to make you a better developer. All it's going to do is bloat your setup and actually cause Claude to perform worse overall. You have to remember that Claude sees every single skill description on every single message. So the more junk you have, the more noise there is, and the more issues Claude is going to run in. Only use what you actually need, and definitely don't be afraid to go and create your own. That's actually where you're going to get the real value. The pipeline checker that I showed you earlier, this is useful because it knows my system, it runs my scripts, and it pulls my live data. There's no community skill pack that's going to do that for you. So go ahead and build stuff that actually solves your problems and skip all the junk. Alright, so before we wrap up, there's a couple more advanced features I want to quickly show you guys. The first one is context fork. What this does is that it allows you to run a skill in a completely separate subagent, so it doesn't eat up your main conversation's context window. So if you have a skill that pulls in a ton of data or generates a lot of output, you could fork it off so it doesn't clutter up the conversation you're currently working with. This is super useful for things like diagnostics or code analysis where you just want a summary back, not all the raw data sitting in your chat. And then lastly, there's the model field. This lets you run a specific skill on a different model than whatever you're currently using. So let's say you're on Opus, but you want to run a simple skill that just formats some text or does something super quick. You could set it to run on Haiku, for example, instead, which would be faster and way cheaper. These features are a lot more niche, and you probably won't be using them in your every day-to-day work, but they're very nice to have. Alright everyone, so that's what skills are. They're not magic. They're not going to turn you into a 10x developer overnight. But when you understand what they actually do, and you build them for your own specific workflows, they're genuinely extremely powerful. Focus on your own use cases, build what you actually need, and don't get caught up in the hype. If you guys found this helpful, make sure to like and subscribe, follow me on Twitter at TheVibeDev, and I'll be posting all this stuff also to my site, thevibedev.io. Drop a comment if you have any questions, and I'll see you in the next one.